Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker, Dr. Sujata Bhan. Dr. Bhan is a professor and head of Department of Special Education, SNDT, Juhu. She has 29 years of experience. She has published books, research papers, and undertaken national and international research projects. Dr. Bhan is an RCI expert committee member and is involved in policy making decisions. She has traveled widely for work in India and internationally. She has been my mentor and guide during my master's program, and I have had the opportunity to learn under her guidance. Today, Dr. Bhan will be speaking about types of child abuse and role of family in teachers with reference with children with special needs. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Bhan. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Cheryl. So good to see you there.
So good to see you, ma'am. Yes.
Very, very pleasantly surprised and happy to see you there. Thank you.
And welcome, Dr. Bhan. Welcome.
Yes, Dr. Smita Hudar. Thank you so much for having me here on this very important, relevant topic. And I appreciate that, you have chosen the road less traveled, because these are things we don't really want to talk about much. So you've taken this initiative of having a seminar on this theme is really appreciable. So thank you for having me. And you are a dear friend, so we can never say no to each other.
True, that's true.
So, all right. So I will just share my screen first.
Yeah, meanwhile, attendance link is there in the chat box. Just 20 seconds. By the time she sets up, please click on that.
So can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Okay. All right. Let me just say a word of caution and warn everybody in the audience that I don't have any internet in my university today because of the rains. The whole campus is without internet. So I'm on my hotspot and keeping my fingers, toes, everything crossed that I'm able to sail through this 1.5 hours without any glitch. So having said that, all right, so my topic for today, I've been asked to speak about the types of child abuse and role of family and teachers, particularly with reference to children with special needs. I'm sure before me, the speakers may have already spoken about what is child abuse and a few things about that. So if there is any repetition, you'll have to bear it with me. Because I'm also going to start talking about and asking you if you can give me, turn on your mic and just make it little interactive. I know these online things become little difficult to manage when we want to have interaction. Nevertheless, we should try as much as we can. So what do you think about child abuse? What is child abuse? Would anybody like to say something? And should I use Hindi and English both mix?
Yeah, a little bit of bilingual always works well, yes. But the conference formal medium of instruction is English.
All right. So my presentation is anyway in English, but I will try to use Hindi here and there.
Yes, please.
I'm not very fluent with Marathi, but Hindi I will definitely try to use. So कुछ भी जो भी आपके दिमाग में आता है, जो भी आप कहना चाहते हैं, कुछ थोड़ा सा मुझे बताइए कि जब आप ये वर्ड सुनते हैं चाइल्ड अब्यूज, तो क्या दिमाग में आता है आपके?
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so the child abuse is any intentional harm or mistreatment to any child under 18 years of age.
Yeah. So the word important here that you highlighted very well is intentional. कि कोई तो किसी जानबूझ के कर रहा है जिससे किसी बच्चे को कुछ हानि हो सके. Another thing, when we talk about child abuse, can anybody tell me what is the type of abuse that first comes to your mind? What is the type of abuse? The moment we hear the word child abuse, the first reaction, the first response, क्या हमारे दिमाग में आता है?
It's either physical or sexual.
Yes. Mostly what comes to our mind is sexual abuse. Child abuse मतलब किसी ने बच्चे को sexually molest किया है, sexually abuse किया है. this is the general trend. If you ask anybody, what do you think about child abuse, they will always tell you something which has sexual connotation. So it is important for us to understand that not necessarily all child abuse is about sexual abuse. So we begin with that. What are the various kinds? What are the various types of child abuse? Yes, physical abuse. अभी हम सब बच्चे जब थे, आजकल तो थोड़ा कम हो गया, पर जब हम बच्चे थे तो बहुत पिटाई भी होती थी. जो मेरी एज ग्रुप के लोग होंगे वो सब इस बात से सहमत हो गए. हम कुछ मस्ती करते थे तो आवर पेरेंट्स वुड थिंक ट्वाइस बिफोर एक थप्पड़ चप्पड़ जो भी फटाफट लग जाता था. एंड आजकल स्कूल में टीचर्स बच्चे के ऊपर हाथ नहीं उठा सकती. कॉर्पोरल पनिशमेंट इज बैंड. वी आर स्टिल getting away with it here and there, but in the Western countries, immediately they'll call up the police if the parents raise their hand on their children. So what is this physical abuse that we are talking about? Physical abuse is when, I will use the word intentional, जो पहले किसी ने बोला वो मुझे बहुत अच्छा word, सही word लगा, कि जब आप किसी बच्चे की intentionally, जानबूझकर बहुत ज्यादा उसकी पिटाई करते हो, like you're hitting the child, you are putting sometimes you'll see some people putting cigarette butts on a child. Sometimes they'll pour hot water on a child. Sometimes I have witnessed it myself. In the family, somebody in vengeance, in revenge, put a hot iron on a young 4-year-old child's arm. That is child abuse. So आप जानबूझकर physically किसी को इस तरह का harm पहुंचा रहे हो क्योंकि आपकी intention है उसको वो harm पहुंचाना, that is physical abuse. And physical abuse, everything else said is later. First and foremost, उसका क्या effect होगा? Physically, वो बच्चे को तकलीफ पहुंचेगी. So absolutely no. There should not be ever any case of physical abuse. Sexual abuse भी जब हम सोचते हैं तो हमारे दिमाग में क्या ख्याल आता है? Anybody, just say a few words. What comes to your mind when you think of sexual abuse? Are you writing your answers in the chat? Okay, no. All right. You can also write your answers and someone can unmute and please say. That is better. जब हम सेक्सुअल अब्यूज की बात करते हैं तो आपके दिमाग में क्या ख्याल आता है?
Rape or molestation.
The first thing is that of molestation. किसी ने किसी के genitals को fondle किया, किसी ने किसी के साथ forced entry किया, oral sex करने की कोशिश की. We always imagine things like that. That's what we commonly read, right? When we talk about sexual abuse. But there are two types of sexual abuse. One is where touching is involved, जहाँ पे आपने बच्चे को छुआ है, जिसमें अभी हमने जो बात की कि molestation किया या sexual intercourse, forced intercourse, etc., where you are touching the child. Now there is also where no touching is involved, that can also be sexual abuse. For example, when you're showing a child intentionally some porn material. The child is not of that age when he should be seeing or watching anything related to porn, but you're forcing a child to watch something like any pornographic material, or you are exposing your genitals to the child. Maybe the child is not touching, but you're arousing him yourself, not the child, by exposing yourself in front of the child. So when we talk about sexual abuse, that can also have different kinds, which we have to bear in mind. It is not just sexually molesting or having a forced intercourse with a child. It can be of variety of types. So that a teacher or a parent should be aware of. Psychological abuse. Psychological abuse हम किसे बोलेंगे? Yes, please. What would be psychological abuse?
Emotional or mental abuse?
Well, quite related to that. Psychological abuse, basically, when we talk about psychology, we talk about a person's self-esteem, sense of self. हम किस प्रकार से बच्चे को abuse करते हैं कि उसकी वो sense of self ही खत्म हो जाती है. like belittling somebody, calling out names, and इस तरह से कि जो उसको अपने ऊपर एक self confidence वो उसका खत्म, जैसे हम बोलते हैं ना, hitting somebody below the belt, आपने ऐसा उसको साइकोलॉजिकली हिट किया है कि जिससे उसका पूरा अपना आत्मसम्मान उसका एकदम रॉक बॉटम हो जाता है. Or you're constantly threatening the child. I will do this if you do this. When you're threatening, that also affects the psychology of a person, psychology of a child, particularly because they are young, they are vulnerable, and that's anything, any untoward environment has a greater impact on them than an adult. So psychological abuse will be when that child who's in his growing up years feels less, inferior, and all the time belittled by others in front of him. It could be anybody around, not necessarily always from the family. It could be anybody from the community, extended family, or even in school, anywhere. But that psychological abuse will have a long-lasting effect on the child's psychology, as his holistic development will be affected. आप में से कईयों ने फ्रॉइड की थ्योरी पढ़ी होगी अपने बीएड डीएड में. The importance of early years, how those early years have to be, which have a long-lasting effect on the development of the growing individual. So agar usko young years mein ye psychological abuse he has experienced, that will have a very bad implication on his growing up years. Verbal abuse. Now, what is verbal abuse? Verbal abuse is simply when we use words to humiliate somebody. This again, intentionally. We are verbally all the time गाली निकालना बच्चे को, हमेशा बच्चे को गाली से ही संबोधित करना. That is verbal abuse. The kind of language that we are using is humiliating. We are manipulating the child. We are controlling the child. That is verbal abuse, which again is seen very common. People who are abusive, they use very bad language in their interactions with the young children, which again leaves a very bad impact on the child's mind. Emotional and mental abuse. इसमें आपकी verbal abuse भी आ जाती है, आपकी psychological abuse भी आ जाती है. But why do we treat it separately? Because in the emotional abuse, there is some एक बंदे के क्या बोलते हैं उसके होने का ही एहसास उसको न दिलाना. Like that person does not exist. You treat that person as if that person does not exist at all. That is the kind of extent of emotional abuse. When you are completely disregarding the emotions of somebody else, constantly the way you're treating that person, you are not in the cognizance of the existence of that particular child, is going to lead to mental abuse, emotional abuse, right? You can do it even with a verbal assault also, but the end line, the bottom line of that will be कि उससे उस बंदे का emotional being जो है, जो हम सब emotions feel करते हैं, मतलब वो बंदा शायद हंसना ही छोड़ दे. हंसी क्या होती है, उसको वो एहसास ही करना छोड़ दे, एक्सप्रेस ही करना छोड़ दे. That is the amount of verbal abuse which can actually be emotionally abusive to that child. Financial abuse. Now you all tell me, what is financial abuse? Yes. This is very simple. What would be financial abuse? Anybody? What is our financial independence? Whatever money we have access to that. We can spend it the way we want to, right? Now imagine a child, they don't have many finances or anything. They don't have money with them, as such. But the feeling given to them that there will be no control of the child in his growing years, he may be an adolescent or a young adult, that he can have access to money. And sometimes people leave money in the name of their children, but the child is not allowed to use that money. It is to prevent that kind of financial independence to a child in his growing years is financial abuse. So for anybody to know that to have that feeling that I'm completely dependent on somebody for money, I have no access to it. Even if I have it, it's not a nice feeling. So financial abuse, particularly, we'll talk about it later, when children with disabilities are there, they have absolutely, we try to control their finances. So they experience financial abuse more than anybody else. Discriminatory abuse, when we are just discriminating a lot of children, a sect of children belonging to a particular group. It could be based on the caste, it could be based on the gender, it could be based on the religion, it could be based on disability. When we are treating someone impartially, unfairly, partially, not impartially, but partially, unfairly, we are discriminating that lot of children. Now, when I'm discriminated because I'm a girl, what is that girl child going to grow up with the feeling कि मैं लड़की क्यों पैदा हुई? काश मैं लड़का होती और काश मैं पैदा ही ना हुई होती क्योंकि मैं लड़की हूँ. मैं disabled क्यों हूँ? मैं इस religion को क्यों belong करती हूँ? Because like we talk about, for example, Islamophobia. I'm sure many must be going through that. Why did I take birth in this particular religious community? Because they're constantly being discriminated. I'm not trying to make any political statement. I'm just giving an example. Don't get me wrong. Or in many places where the Hindus are being discriminated, they would be feeling the same thing. So the children, when they are growing up, they have a sense of identity. I belong to a Kashmiri Pandit family. I belong to a Gujarati Samaj. I belong to this particular religion or this particular caste. But if I'm subjected to discrimination right from my being a young child, I'll always have that crisis of identity. So this also leaves a lot of negative impact on the growing up child. Organizational or institutional abuse, many a times you will see the organizations by themselves are very discriminatory. In fact, I was just watching the film. If you get a chance, it's a beautiful Tamil film with English subtitles called Jana Gana Mana. In that movie, they show that how students coming from a particular caste are completely controlled, discredited, isolated, sabotaged because they come from that particular caste. Now, this is the institutional abuse on that sect of students. If you, for example, see in a hospital, there is absolute lack of care. You see, for example, an orphanage, there is absolute lack of care and there is no safety. That is organizational abuse. Or you see maybe a particular workplace which is not conducive, rather there is complete neglect of their rights or anything. That is organizational abuse for an older person, right? But when we are talking about child abuse, it could be seen in an orphanage. It could be seen in a daycare where they just don't care about children. Neglect. Neglect is another form of abuse. Now, what is this neglect? Not providing the child the basics, what is his right, whether it includes the medical needs of a child, educational needs of the child, physical needs of the child, or emotional needs of the child. Any need which is basic, if we look at the hierarchy of needs as given by Maslow, what is basic to any child, that is also not provided to the child, is called neglect. I'll give you an example here. In my building, there was a family. They had two daughters, and one of the daughters was having cerebral palsy. All the four limbs were affected, and she was about 15. And the father of the girl was in Merchant Navy. They owned that flat where they lived, so economically well-to-do. And then they had a younger daughter who was about 8 at that point of time, and who was a bright young girl like any other normal kid. Now, the father was anyway not there half the time. He was in Merchant Navy sailing. So the mother, her whole attention was on the younger kid. And when I would talk to her, you can't even interfere too much unless you're asked for it. You can't give unsolicited advice all the time. But फिर भी आदत से मजबूर, I'm a talkative person and inquisitive, and I want to, like कुछ है तो किसी को बता दो types. So I would tell her कि इसको आप नीचे नहीं लेके आते, उसके पास wheelchair नहीं है. I was shocked. She's 15-year-old girl. अभी तक इन्होंने कभी wheelchair लेने का नहीं सोचा. So then very, तरीके से ऐसे करके I pushed her to buy a wheelchair. Finally, they got a wheelchair. अभी व्हीलचेयर लेके नीचे क्यों नहीं आते? टाइम नहीं है. कहाँ बिजी रहते हो? अरे आपको पता नहीं, मेरी छोटी लड़की इस एक्टिविटी में जाती है, उस एक्टिविटी में जाती है, मॉडलिंग भी करती है. She gave me like so many excuses that her whole time energy is revolving around her younger daughter, and she's practically got no time for the older daughter. But she's being a nice mother. She gives her food on time. She provides her neat and tidy clothes. So what else does she want? And what about therapies? No, we tried when she was younger, but it didn't bring any result, and it's so expensive. So we stopped. So that's an example of neglect. If you feel a child with a disability does not have basic needs because the child cannot communicate, that is neglect. So you deny that child of whatever basics, basic recreation, basic, even if the child is not communicating, you can still be around and have some activity, have some interaction with the child, then all that is missing, that is abuse. And that was a typical example of abuse. And though the parent would never accept that. Bullying and cyberbullying. Nowadays, every child is addicted to their phone, their tablets, their computers. So we have to also see if a child is abused in the cyberspace. That is also one of the very prominent kinds of child abuse in today's time. So we have to be careful about that as well, which perhaps we wouldn't even know what the child is watching, whom the child is interacting with, and it could be seen in other symptoms that the child shows, any abused child shows, but we would not be able to guess that it could be the cyberbullying or simple bullying in the school. Many a times children can be very nasty. You'll always find some precocious group of kids in school who are abusive, who are, कहते हैं ना, Amir Khandan ke bigde hue aulad type of children who try to bully the ones who are ज़्यादा बोलते नहीं है, shy है, या किसी भी वजह से उनके comparison में थोड़े कम है, उतने flamboyant नहीं है, उनको वो bully करते हैं. तो इस चीज का भी अपने को ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा कि किस तरह का abuse, कितनी तरह का abuse एक बच्चा may be going through, right? Now, a young girl says, "It hurts when you made me a woman when I was just a little girl." What implications can child abuse cast on a child, and who's at risk? That is something we have to be very, very alert about. Now, I'll share some facts with you. What does the statistics say? An alarming prevalence of violence against children with disabilities is seen, from higher vulnerability to physical and emotional violence when they are young, and greater risk of sexual violence as they reach puberty. जो छोटे होते हैं उनमें फिजिकल और इमोशनल अब्यूज ज्यादा देखा जाता है, मगर जैसे ही वो बच्चे थोड़े बड़े होने लगते हैं तो हमें सेक्सुअल अब्यूज के केसेस ज्यादा मिलते हैं. Children and adolescents with disabilities are 3 to 4 times more likely to experience physical and sexual violence and neglect than any other child. 3 to 4 times more cases are reported of sexual violence, physical violence when the child is having a disability. Up to 68% of girls and 30% of boys with intellectual and developmental disabilities are sexually abused before reaching their 18th birthday. By the time they're 18, before that, at least 68% of girls and 30% of boys have had some experience of sexual abuse if they have any developmental disability or they have intellectual disability. The statistics is alarming. We need to understand why. क्यों उनमें ज्यादा होता है? Now let's look at the holistic picture. If you look at it from the parental point of view, you see parents can become easily stressed when they are parenting a child with disability. Ask any parent of a child with disability the kind of stresses that they go through. It is very challenging. It is very demanding. But does that warrant that they abuse their child? No, I'm not certainly condoning that. All I'm saying is that, yes, the parents are under tremendous stress. The job that they have to do is very challenging, and that can make them sometimes volatile. And when they are volatile, they become physically abusive, right? They can be verbally abusive because they are, many a times, when do we hit a child? हम बच्चे को बोलते हैं चुप करके बैठ जाओ, वो नहीं चुप होता, हम फिर बोलते हैं, वो फिर नहीं बोल, फिर एक तप, एक यहाँ से तप, क्यों? Because वो हमारी बात नहीं सुनता, we are frustrated. Basically, when we are frustrated, we take it on the child. In our frustration, we become abusive. Now, children with behavior problems like ADHD or any behavioral issues are more likely to experience physical abuse because parents are frustrated. That's what I just said. When you are not able to control that situation, when you're not able to manage their behaviors, out of sheer frustration, we become physically abusive and we respond harshly. Many a times, our students, when they go for their visits to different special schools, they say, "Ma'am, it's so sad how the teachers are hitting the children." We always tell them what they're doing is wrong, absolutely wrong, but you should also the teachers well know you have tried in the past, you're able to engage them in activity. You will not be so able. So your that you're taking out on the child. So we see how it becomes aggravated when we have children with disability.
Dr. Bhan,
Yes.
I think a connectivity issue was there for a minute. If you want to turn off the video, that will give a stronger audio.
Sure. I generally feel the video, everybody should keep it on so that at least there is some connectivity,
Absolutely.
some
Absolutely.
Otherwise, that is my only intention.
I know.
Okay, could you hear the all the points, first, second point?
Yes.
Okay, I'll move on further.
Yes, please.
All right. Children who are less able to do things independently are naturally relying more on the adults for their care. These children may be more likely to be sexually abused or neglected by adults. Now, when they are not independent physically, they are dependent on somebody else. Then naturally, it is so much more burden on the parents or on the caretaker or whoever is around. Then when you again get frustrated, you can't cope with it, you become abusive. When the child is independent, he may be having some disability, but he's independent, then there will not be a problem. But when they're completely dependent on somebody, and then that can cause excessive, responsibility, and basically thak jata hai banda, wo us thakawat mein, us frustration mein, the chances of that adult around can become more of abusive behavior can be more. It is not justified. I'm again and again reiterating on this point. I'm not trying to say it is justified. I'm just explaining the reasons why we said in the previous slide that children with special needs are more abused. That is what I'm talking about. Okay. Then, abusers may take advantage of children who have problems in speaking or hearing or who don't understand social situations very well. Now, here I will share an example. There was a teacher who was blind, and there were children who were also blind. I won't name the institute, I won't name the class, but what happened? Now, this teacher abused her children in a group, and somebody made a video. And a big noise was made, obviously, after that. And it was very shocking because I knew the teacher very well and the organization very well, and it was totally unheard of. And then we all, academicians started to analyze the whole situation. Why this happened? Why would somebody do such a thing, which is totally unacceptable? Now you understand when a child cannot speak. आपको क्या लगता है ये किसको बताएगा जाके? जब बच्चा सुन नहीं सकता या देख नहीं सकता, उसे ये नहीं पता चल रहा कि कौन उसको अब्यूज कर रहा है. Now these kind of limitations give a kind of leeway or reinforce. Hello, can I be heard?
Yes,
Hello?
ma'am. We can hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I suddenly didn't see the window. You know, I have that side में window रहता है ना, वो नहीं दिखा तो मुझे लगा कहीं disconnect हो गई. So anyway, what am I trying to say is that when a child has a disability, see, cannot hear, cannot speak, तो दूसरा उसकी advantage लेने की कोशिश करता है. और जब वो advantage ये भी इसलिए भी लेता है, उसे ऐसा लगता है कि this is the only way to give them pleasure and to get pleasure myself. This was the reason why this incident happened. The person doing it, the perpetrator, felt that this is the way she or he can enjoy, and the ones who were engaged didn't even realize that they were being abused because they were also somewhere feeling that that's the correct way to do it. This is the norm. This is how it is done. That lack of knowledge perpetuates this kind of behavior. Then children with disabilities out of fear or as a result of lack of information, pata hi nahi hai, may feel pressed to conceal their suffering. They are afraid of stigmatization. They are afraid of harassment. They might not be able to make a complaint or report the incident of violence that they have suffered. And they may believe that they could lose the support of their caregivers, the attention that they are getting from the same people, and the love of the individuals that they depend on. Suppose it's a family member who's their caretaker. उसी की अगर हम कंप्लेंट कर देंगे तो फिर तो ये केयर टेकर भी नहीं रहेगा, तो मेरा कैसे गुजारा होगा? कौन मुझे खाना खिलाएगा? कौन मुझे कपड़े पहनाएगा? Or will everybody believe me because the person doing it is perhaps, you know, a prominent member of the family? This harassment, क्या हुआ? बताओ. That stigmatization, वो shame, all these things make it difficult for a child to talk about it, to complain to somebody. And when at some point, when they break down and the parents find out or somebody else finds out and then they're questioned, "Pehle kyun nahi bataya?" They don't know what they have gone through. They don't know. It's not easy to talk about such things. And I can tell you, all of us have experienced abuse in some form or the other, little more severe. Everybody goes through this in their growing years. We don't talk about it because perhaps it was not so major, or we have learned to deal with it, or we have just repressed it. Each one of us finds our own coping mechanisms. But for some, for whom it has been severe, long-lasting, everlasting, it will keep coming back. It will keep coming back, haunting them at some point of time in life. But it's a very normal practice. So we as parents, as teachers, we have to be extremely alert and extremely aware and informed about what all can go wrong. Incidents of violence reported by children with disabilities are largely dismissed, as their caregivers are often unprepared and ill-trained to consider the complaints and to effectively take them into account. कुछ भी बोलती है, हाँ, ऐसा नहीं हुआ होगा, तुम्हें बड़ा समझ में आया होगा, उसने प्यार से गले लगाया होगा, तुम्हें बड़ा पता है. Generally, this will be the, you know, the response if any child dares to complain, because we underestimate the intellectual capacity of any child with any disability. CP भी पागल है, VI भी पागल है, जो बेचारा mentally, intellectually challenge है, वो तो है ही. But we generally attribute less cognitive functioning with any disability. इनको क्या समझ में आता है, इन्हें क्या पता है? So it will be just dismissed. So even if somebody tries to, they will not take their complaints seriously. In many countries, legislation does not recognize the testimony of children with disabilities. Just imagine, अगर law ही आपकी बात को झूठला दे, तो आप कहाँ जाओगे? It does not allow them to sign their names in legal documents or give evidence under oath, that is like, you're just playing with these children. उनका कोई हक नहीं है, उनकी बात में कोई वजन नहीं है. Just completely, disregard what they say. अगर law ही ऐसा करेगा, तो you can imagine how strong the perpetrators feel that they can get away by abusing a child with disability. Therefore, the chances of abuse with children with disabilities is more. Now, with this background, the Sustainable Development Goals, they have acknowledged that this is a concern. Now, we are all talking about SDG goals. So they have also acknowledged this. This is very important step. They say that all forms of violence against children needs to be ended, needs to be stopped, which includes abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, any kind of child abuse. The Convention on the Rights of the Child recognizes that all children, including children with disabilities, are entitled to protection from all forms of violence. These are very important mandates that we have against child abuse, right? So it is essential to invest in awareness raising and information, including research about child disability and the forms and prevalence of violence compromising their enjoyment of equal rights. कोई भी चीज, किसी भी चीज पे जब हम चर्चा करते हैं, अगर हमारे पास उससे रिलेटेड डेटा नहीं है, we are talking in thin air. We are not, हम सबूत इकट्ठे नहीं कर रहे, हम वो मटेरियल इकट्ठा नहीं कर रहे जिसके डंके की चोट पे हम कह सकते हैं कि इतना वायलेंस होता है, इसके लिए सरकार इनके लिए कुछ करिए. Therefore, collection of data, how will the data come? When we, do some research in this area and not let it be a taboo topic, not let it be shoved under the carpet. That's what I said in the beginning. I'm glad you chose this topic, Dr. Asmita. We have to talk about it to know how much of child abuse is prevalent and how much more in our field with our children. And then when we highlight that, there will be government who will make sure, again, everything involves funds, everything involves, work in that direction, laws, policies, funds, everything. That we need to create awareness, we need to spread information. सिर्फ जब हम बात करते हैं inclusive education में बच्चों के लिए modules बनाओ, classroom teacher के लिए, special teacher के लिए, खाली उसके लिए नहीं. Sex education के लिए modules बनाइए. Sex education for children with disabilities के लिए modules बनाइए. उसमें teachers की training करिए, उसमें parents की training करिए, उसमें community की training करिए. Because we have to work together with children with disabilities, their families, and organizations, communities to promote their rights. It is very, very essential. I don't know why I'm not able to shift again. 1 second. Yes. So we need to have a three-pronged approach for preventing child abuse, for recognizing child abuse and responding to that. The moment we talk about child abuse, we have to first see how can it be prevented? What are the measures that can be taken to prevent? कहते हैं ना, कोई चीज के होने से पहले ही कुछ ऐसी सावधानियां बरती है कि वो होए ही ना. So how do we prevent? अब अगर हो गया है, हमें कैसे पता लगेगा कि हो रहा है? So how do we recognize that? क्योंकि कितनी बार child abuse होता चला जाता है सालों साल, and we don't even know that a child is going through abuse. So it is very important for us to understand how can we recognize child abuse so that we prevent it from further happening and respond to it. Once we know this child is being abused, do we ignore it? Do we shove it under the carpet? Or do we take the perpetrator एकदम गले पकड़ के उसको और सही सजा and send a message across that anybody who does any such activity will not be spared. So how do we respond to it is also very, very important. When we say it is important, now who's going to do it? That's where the role of family comes in. What is the role of the family in preventing, recognizing, and responding to child abuse? First and foremost, we will talk about prevention. Safe, stable, and nurturing relationships, happy families. The kind of contact, the kind of bonding, the time we spend with each other, it is very important to create a safe haven for children. जो फैमिली है वो एक सेफ जगह एक बच्चे के लिए होनी चाहिए, to protect the child from any harm. वो बोलते हैं ना, जो माँ है वो एक काली माता का रूप धारण कर लेती है अपने बच्चे के लिए, कि मजाल है कोई उसके बच्चे को हाथ लगाए, अपने हस्बैंड से भिड़ जाएगी, अपने सास ससुर से भिड़ जाएगी, किसी से भी भिड़ जाएगी, अपने बच्चों के ऊपर आंच नहीं आने देगी. Right? So we have to have that kind of nurturing home environment. What the child is perceiving is love and warmth and security and safety in this unit. जो उसका घर है, उसमें ये बहुत जरूरी है. The child feels safe in that. Young children experience their world through relationships with parents and other caregivers. उनका दुनिया के बारे में क्या नजरिया बनेगा, उनके क्या परसेप्शन बनेंगे, is determined by their relationships with their family members. We all know family is most crucial for the healthy development of a child, right? So we cannot more emphasize on it. We all acknowledge that. So even for when we are talking about in terms of child abuse, it boils down to what kind of family they are coming from, and is the child experiencing such warm and loving relationships with people around him. Parents need to be informed. How can they detect? How can they recognize? Prevention हो गया. अगर आपके घर में इतना अच्छा आपने माहौल बना लिया है, and you are always alert कि कोई your child is protected, it's safe environment, then it's fine. But then if it is happening, how will you recognize it? Parents can prevent abuse and neglect of children if they know that sudden change in behavior or unusual behavior they observe in their child. अच्छा भला खेलता बोलता चलता बच्चा एकदम चुप हो गया है, किसी से बात नहीं करता, कमरे में घुसा रहता है. We can attribute it to growing years. This cannot be always the case कि वो abused है तो इसीलिए ऐसा करता है, but it could be. That's what we have to pay attention. Don't always think ये growing years है, ऐसे में तो बच्चे ऐसे करते ही हैं. नहीं, be alert. You see some unusual cuts and bruises. बच्चे से पूछो कहाँ पे लगी, नहीं गिर गया था. But you often see those cuts and bruises. Is the child inflicting pain on himself, or is it somebody else inflicting pain on him? Physical abuse हो सकता है, कोई बच्चे को harm कर रहा है, पहुंचा रहा है. Or you see that the child is often having broken bones, not because of medical condition, but somebody is hitting him hard. Or the child is complaining of some burns. You can see the child is having burns. जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, गरम पानी, गरम प्रेस तो मैंने अपनी आंखों से देखा है. मैंने पहले भी बताया आपको, and I can never forget that. That how can a child be abused with a hot iron? And when they are having any sexual intercourse or any sexual abnormal behavior by some perpetrator, then the child will be crying. You may even see blood coming out. So be alert to such signs. Know where your child is and what he or she is doing when he or she is not at home. Keep a track where your child is. Very, very important today. Some years back, I was visiting a family and they were sending their child to school, and there was a car and a driver, and yet the grandmother accompanied. Now, this was many years back. At that time, I feel now it is more, the society's become such that you don't trust anybody. But 20 years back, I think we lived in a more trusting environment. So I said, why did the Dadi go along? Driver hai na? नहीं किसी का भरोसा नहीं है, छोटी बच्ची है, साथ में ड्राइवर. So I thought it was like over pampering. You're trying to be unnecessarily overprotective. इतना पुराना ड्राइवर है, अभी साथ में क्या जाने की जरूरत. But now you realize that parents are very, very cautious. They do take extra care to see whether it's a girl child or a boy child. That doesn't matter. You are always alert where your child is, with whom your child is, and what is the child up to. You have to be informed. Only leave your child with someone you know who can take care. I mean, you have to be absolutely trusting where you're leaving a child. Now, again, I'll share my personal experience. I was a working mom. So my son stopped going to a daycare and he used to come home and he was in class 4th and he would just be alone by himself at home. I had put a music class for him. From the school only, the teacher would come home and teach him, prepare him for the Trinity exam on that, what is it called, the keyboard. Then another friend brought it to my attention. She said, don't allow him to attend the class when you're not there. So I said, he's a school teacher. She said, no, don't trust anybody. And I said, oh yeah, she has a point. Again, I'm basically by nature trusting. And now again, I'm talking about, let's say maybe 20 years back. Things were not as bad as they are today. But at that point, this friend of mine said, what you're doing is wrong. Ask him to come only when you're there. Whom do you trust? The maid that you have at home, can you trust her? Whether it's a female maid or a male maid, you're not sure, but there are circumstances where you have no choice but to leave your child either in a daycare or in a, at home with a maid. What do? It may not be practically possible always to have somebody there. But again, from your end, you have to be alert about the child's behavior, the person who is at home, their behavior, and be very, pick up these cues quickly, be smart. If there is any form of any harm, any clue or any, कोई भी आपको वो इशारा दिखे कि कुछ शायद कुछ गड़बड़ है, be alert. Don't take things for granted. That is what I'm trying to say. Be very, very alert. Yeah. Know that your child's school must treat your child with dignity. Many a times in schools, the teachers can be very nasty. The children can be very nasty. Bullying the child, what I mentioned earlier. So just make sure that they are not harming the dignity of your child. Again, I'll give you an example. Once it so happened, a child in class 8th or 7th was drinking water without asking the teacher. Generally you say, Miss, can I have water? The child didn't ask. The water bottle was there. He just picked up the water bottle and started drinking water. You know what the teacher did? She came, she snatched the bottle from the boy's hand and she flung it on the child and the whole water spilled on his uniform in front of everybody. What prompted that reaction of the teacher? Perhaps she would have told the students before that don't do anything without seeking permission or something like that. But still, did it warrant this kind of behavior? Certainly not. And how would that have affected the sense of dignity of that child? And if this kind of behavior is meted out to this child day in and day out, for some reason, he's segregated, there is discriminatory attitude, that will affect the dignity of this child. So talk to your child what happens in the school and don't let anybody break that spirit and dignity of your child. Take steps to make sure your house is a safe place for your child or he or she will not get injured. Make sure in all possible ways that this is a safe place, haven for the child. Talk to your child about behavior in situations that are safe and not safe. So you have to educate the child. What is safe? What is right? What is not safe? The child needs to be well informed. Identify and remind your child of safe adults that he or she can turn to. We always say, in my absence, Masi se aap baat kar sakte ho. Papa se aap baat kar sakte ho. Bhaiya se aap baat kar sakte ho. Or the child may just talk to everybody. Particularly when we are talking about children with special needs, they need to be told. They cannot generalize. They cannot discriminate. So we have to tell them precisely matter-of-factly, whom they can trust and whom they cannot trust. Role-playing and practicing how to find a safe adult can help young children learn where to go, right? So we do a lot of fun activities with the children so that they understand what is right and what is wrong. The teacher can do the same, parents can do the same. So particularly, what is the role of teachers? To educate the child. Teachers need to know the normal sexual development in the first place so that they can identify if something is found amiss. They should be able to recognize sexual abuse. Exhibiting unhealthy or harmful sexual behaviors is a sign that the child may have been sexually abused. So the teacher needs to know. You know, we keep talking about good touch, bad touch. That's not the only thing that is important in sex education. Sex education is so much more than just good touch and bad touch. So the teachers need to be first trained themselves. Teach children emotional regulation. What is emotional regulation? For them to be able to identify their feelings and to be able to communicate those feelings, how they are feeling. If they are feeling afraid, they should be able to tell so that I'm afraid. If they are feeling pain or, you know, they're ashamed of something, they should be able to tell so that I'm feeling pain, physical pain, emotional pain, and I'm also even ashamed to talk about it. Why? You have to talk to them about them. Many a times they are not able to talk. They can write about it. They can express their feelings. Teach the children, particularly those with disabilities, particularly those, to express those emotions in different manner. Not necessarily always they have to verbalize their emotions. So this again calls for training of teachers. Not every teacher will be able to do it just naturally. You know, sometimes we have young teachers, they're themselves not comfortable with their own sexuality. How will they teach about sex education to their children? So the teachers need training, very, very important. Encourage parents to talk to their children openly and honestly about healthy sexual development. Teachers have to encourage the parents. They have to tell the parents, don't use these, you know, words we all, while mollycoddling our children, we use different names for genitals. We are very, you know, iske baare mein baat nahi karte, iske baare mein bolna galat baat hai. Talk to them freely so that they understand if something is going wrong, they should be able to talk about it. It's not a taboo topic. Ye bahut zaruri hai. And tell your children that report if you find something is not, like encourage children to talk about it. They have to report if they are experiencing any kind of abuse. Create an atmosphere of safety in your classroom and be someone they can trust. You know, if you have 10 teachers, you'll always find some teachers are more popular because children have developed that bond with them. So every teacher should try to be that kind of a teacher जिसके पास बच्चे बात कर सकते हैं, जिनको बच्चे trust कर सकते हैं, जिनको बच्चे as a friend मानते हैं. हमारे साथ कुछ भी अगर गड़बड़ है, this is one teacher I can go to. So we have to be a teacher like that. All of us have to aspire to be a teacher like that, that our children can trust us and they can come to us if they feel there is something that they need to talk about. From all that I have been speaking, if I have to summarize in few points, what will I focus on? That child sexual abuse is an epidemic that impacts far too many families and communities. बहुत लोग इससे गुजरते हैं. They may not talk about it, but many people, many families, many children go through it. So be aware of that. So be alert about it. Their parents, teachers, and community members can make a difference if we all come together, we all acknowledge कि होता है, इसको हम कैसे प्रिवेंट कर सकते हैं और कैसे हमें पता लग सकता है कि शायद इस बच्चे के साथ ये हो रहा है और कैसे हम उसको हेल्प कर सकते हैं. If we all work together, all parents, teachers, and community members, definitely we can prevent such things from happening. As we make it safe to openly discuss this topic, we can lower the number of children being abused. The more we talk about it, the more we become aware about it, at parental level, at teachers level, at community level, definitely the instances of child abuse will decrease. Learn what to look for and speak up about this topic. It could make all the difference in the world to your students. So talk about it. Thank you. That's all I wanted to share. Now I'm open to your observations, your points of view, and anything that you want to discuss. Bring it on the forum. It will be nice to exchange your experiences. Yes. With your permission, can I turn my video on now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, okay.
Nothing of the sort. Maybe
No,
my
no, no,
I
I
had
understand.
connected
I
issue, I
understand.
don't know.
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anybody has any question or any experience to share, more than a question, I think if any experience to share that you have seen and you have prevented or you have intervened, that will be very nice.
Yeah. So I guess Sheetal chat box mein there are no questions or comments, right?
English is more comfortable. Okay, I can see that. So I think I did speak a lot of English.
Yeah. So any comments, any doubts, anything to be shared?
Abuse done for sexual gratification. Yes, the perpetrator is deriving satisfaction, is deriving basically the sense of control, power over the person whom you're abusing. And the child is most helpless, will not retaliate. And a child with disability, even more so. So yes, it gives you an extreme sense of power. You know, if you speak to a young mother, she'll tell you when the child is young, मजा आता है बच्चे को पालने में. Normally in a healthy manner, nothing wrong with that. But when you're abusing the child, is you slap the child, you get that sense of एक थप्पड़ लगाया. बच्चा जब 18 साल का आपको वापस आके खाएगा या आपका हाथ पकड़ लेगा, तब आपको वो sense of power नहीं है. Because now the child has become powerful. So yes, they do it for gratification, but in a manner where they get a sense of power. So it's not healthy in any sense, in any way, right? Any questions? No. CRE attendance link, everybody's focusing on the attendance, and the MCQs का नहीं पूछा अभी, test का भी है. Immediately.
Or that is sorted. We've been telling them all the time. But yes, वो post test आती है after the presentation every time. Those are mandatory things.
Yes, yes.
Asmita ma'am, there are no questions in the chat box.
Okay.
Okay,
So then we
but-
can wind up now.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you very much.
Okay, and let me just tell you, because you mentioned that I selected the topic. No, it is actually Dr. Kasturi Kulkarni who selected who's the process owner for this. She selected it. In fact, I had my apprehensions about it, in the sense, you know, I thought we'll have to run extra mile. Disability ke bahar ke bhi experts lane padenge. I was like that, and she takes full credit. She stuck to it, said, "Ma'am, I want this."
Cheryl here. I'll bring in Cheryl. Cheryl, are you very much there still?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Why don't you share your experience? When you were doing your MA dissertation, what was your plan and what was it reduced to?
Yes, ma'am. Oh yeah, that was that was a lot of I got a lot of rejections actually, even from the school, and ma'am helped me get through that. Okay, it is okay that, you know, many people will hide it, will not come out with certain things, like will not talk about abuse, will not. So they were not open to, like, my basically my thesis was educating children with sex education. That was the main topic.
Topic
So
was sex education.
yes, sex
I
education.
developed a whole module on sex education. So all and for children with intellectual disability. And any school that she went to, she was told, no, 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 no. Don't put these ideas in our children's mind. We don't want to talk about these things. So what do I do? Just teach them how to use a sanitary napkin when they are having their menstrual cycle. It is very sad. We are not open to creating that awareness. So the incident that I was talking about, they don't know what is right and what is wrong because nobody talks about it. That is why they abuse and they get abused. You know, a child who is abused also has a tendency to be abusive.
Yeah, we learned that in the earlier session. Yes,
Yes,
very
yes,
true, very
yes.
true. And very interesting, Cheryl. We'll get in touch with you. Maybe you can make a small presentation for our BEds on your dissertation. That
Then,
would
Sure,
be.
ma'am.
then she couldn't do what she had planned to do. She
Oh,
couldn't
she
go
had.
ahead. She had to
Oh.
change it. That's why I said you share your experience. She couldn't go ahead. And this is my
Oh.
second student. There was one more student prior to her. Even she met with the same thing, same response. Don't.
Hmm.
That's sad. That's really
Very
sad.
sad. I hope things have changed. Well, she was my MH student way back. Not much has changed. That also I'll admit.
Changed, yes.
Not much has changed, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Over to you then,